Have you ever felt completely certain, only to discover later that you were missing something important? Have you ever believed your answer was the only right one, until life quietly proved otherwise? We all do it sometimes. We look quickly, we decide quickly, and without meaning to, we misunderstand people who were never truly wrong in the first place. Today's story is simple, gentle, almost ordinary, and yet, hidden inside it is a lesson many people spend years learning the hard way. So take a slow breath and listen closely, because by the end of this story, you may never look at disagreements the same way again. In a quiet suburban town in Ohio, where maple trees lined the sidewalks and the mornings smelled faintly of fresh coffee, there lived a young girl named Sophie Carter. Sophie was known by everyone in her neighborhood. She had bright, curious eyes, a quick smile, and a way of talking that made people feel instantly at ease. Every morning, with her small purple backpack bouncing lightly against her shoulders, Sophie walked to Jefferson Elementary School with a cheerful rhythm in her step. She loved recess. She loved art class. She loved story time more than anything. But there was one subject that made her stomach tighten every single day: math. Numbers didn't feel friendly to Sophie. They didn't feel clear or predictable the way they did to some of the other children. Sometimes the numbers seemed to blur together, like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. Her parents noticed, her teacher noticed, and slowly, Sophie began to notice too. One crisp Tuesday morning, the classroom buzzed with excitement as the children settled into their seats. Their teacher, Mr. Reynolds, was a calm and thoughtful man in his early 40s. He spoke gently, moved patiently, and believed deeply that every child learned in their own time. That morning, he smiled warmly and said, "All right, everyone. Today we're going to start with something fun. Take out your drawing notebooks." Instant energy filled the room. Chairs scraped, pencils tapped, crayons rolled across desks like tiny, colorful fireworks. Sophie's face lit up immediately because, while math confused her, drawing was where she truly came alive. She opened her notebook carefully and began to sketch with quiet focus. Her small hand moved with surprising confidence, gentle lines forming a bright park scene with trees, a blue sky, and children flying kites. Time seemed to soften around her when she drew. When the activity ended, Mr. Reynolds slowly walked from desk to desk, reviewing each child's work. He understood something very important about young minds. Encouragement, when given sincerely, could shape confidence for years to come. So on each notebook, he wrote something kind. "Nice effort. Great colors. Well done." When he reached Sophie's desk, he paused. Her drawing was not perfect, but it was full of feeling, full of care, full of quiet attention. He smiled and wrote neatly across the top of her page, "Beautiful work, Sophie. Keep drawing." When Sophie saw the words, her heart lifted instantly. She traced the sentence gently with her finger, as if it were something precious. In that small moment, she felt capable, seen, proud. But the school day was not finished yet. Later that afternoon, math class began, and with it, Sophie's familiar tension returned. Mr. Reynolds stood at the front of the classroom holding a small basket of fruit. "Let's warm up our brains," he said gently. The students straightened in their chairs. He reached into the basket and pulled out 3 bright red oranges. "Okay, class," he said, "let's think together." He looked around the room calmly before continuing. "If I give you 1 orange, then another orange, and then 1 more orange, how many oranges will you have in total?" Several hands shot into the air immediately. 3, the class answered in cheerful unison. Mr. Reynolds nodded with a small smile. Then his eyes moved gently across the room until they rested on Sophie. "Sophie," he said kindly, Would you like to try? Sophie swallowed softly. She lifted her small hands and began counting carefully on her fingers. 1, 2, 3. Her brow furrowed slightly. She hesitated. Then, with a hopeful smile, she said, 4. The classroom fell quiet. A few children glanced at one another. Mr. Reynolds did not react immediately. He had learned long ago that quick correction sometimes closed young minds instead of opening them, so he simply nodded thoughtfully. "All right," he said calmly. "Let's try something different." He reached into the basket again and this time pulled out 3 strawberries. "Now imagine this," he said gently. "If I give you 1 strawberry, then another strawberry, and then 1 more strawberry, how many strawberries will you have?" Sophie looked down at her fingers again and counted slowly, carefully. This time her face brightened. 3, she said confidently. Mr. Reynolds smiled. "Good," he said softly. But something still puzzled him. He returned to the oranges. "All right, Sophie," he continued patiently. "Let's go back to the oranges one more time." He walked toward her desk and placed 1 orange gently in her hand. "Here is 1, then another, and here is 2, then the 3rd, and here is 3. He looked at her kindly. "Now tell me, Sophie, how many oranges do you have?" Sophie didn't hesitate this time. She looked down at the fruit in her hands, then back up at her teacher. 4, she said simply. A few students shifted in their seats. One child quietly whispered, "It's 3. Mr. Reynolds felt a flicker of confusion. His voice remained calm but firmer now. "Sophie," he said gently, "we just counted together. There are 3 oranges. Why do you think it's 4? For a brief moment, Sophie's shoulders drew inward and her fingers tightened slightly around the fruit. Then, in a small, careful voice, she answered, "Because I already had 1 orange in my backpack." Silence filled the room, not the uncomfortable kind, the thoughtful kind. Mr. Reynolds blinked slowly, and in that quiet second, something shifted. He hadn't been looking at the full picture. He had been solving the problem from his perspective. But Sophie had been answering from hers. He felt a gentle smile form as understanding settled in. "You're right," he said softly. Sophie looked up, surprised. He continued, his voice warm. "You weren't wrong. You were counting everything you had." The tension in Sophie's shoulders melted. Around the classroom, several students sat very still, absorbing what had just happened. Mr. Reynolds walked back to the front of the room and rested his hands lightly on the desk. "Class," he said calmly, "today we learned something more important than math." The children leaned forward slightly. "Sometimes," he continued, "when someone gives a different answer, it doesn't mean they are careless, and it doesn't always mean they are wrong." He paused gently. "Sometimes they are simply seeing something we haven't noticed yet." The room remained quiet, not because the children were confused, but because in their own young way, they understood. That afternoon, when the final bell rang, Sophie packed her purple backpack carefully. Inside, next to her notebooks and pencils, rested the small orange she had mentioned earlier. She zipped the bag closed with a soft smile. Because for the first time in a long while, math hadn't made her feel small. And Mr. Reynolds, standing by the classroom door as the students left, carried a quiet reminder with him too. Teaching was not only about giving answers. Sometimes it was about learning to see through someone else's eyes. My friend, the same quiet lesson follows us into adulthood. How many times have we dismissed someone too quickly? How often have we assumed we had the full story, when in truth we were only seeing part of it? Life rarely presents us with perfect, complete pictures. People carry experiences we cannot see. They hold memories we do not know. And sometimes, their answers come from places we never thought to look. Being right feels satisfying, but being understanding changes lives. So the next time someone's answer surprises you, pause, listen, look again. You might discover there was always more to the story. If this gentle story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more meaningful life lessons. Thank you so much for spending these quiet moments here. Wishing you wisdom, patience, and a beautiful day ahead.